I think one of the great joys of archaeology is you never know everything. You can never know everything because your techniques are changing all the time. The early discoveries made in Bath were sort of antiquarian. They were sort of relished and made a big fuss of and published, and people came to see them. But there was no sense of research in the 18th century. The thing that really put Bath on the map as a Roman site was the discovery of this bronze head of Minerva, which everyone who thinks of Bath associates that bronze head, which is on display now. And it was found in 1727 when they were putting a sewer through Store Street and found this head, a remarkable thing to find anywhere, anytime. But suddenly here was Roman Bath, before you looked at this bronze head. And you just thought of the Romans. And that was the beginning, and very famous. And then the next major thing to happen was in 1790 when they rebuilt the pump room. They took down the old pump room and built the pump room we've got there now. And when they built the north wall of the pump room, they had to dig down very deep because there was all this mud and rubble and so on. They had to find a strong, hard foundation. They went down 12 feet, I think, 4 meters. And in doing that, they found large numbers of pieces of sculptured stone and realized that what they were finding was, in fact, the facade of the temple, the front of the temple. This great triangular pediment with the head of the Gorgon actually depicted on a shield held up by 2 winged victories. And they even found bits of the columns and a little bit of the architrave with VM on, saying temple, something about the temple. And from 1790, they realised that close to where the head of Minerva was found, here was the temple. And from then on, all we've been doing is adding more and more and more and more each generation. And I think if you look at the history of archaeology in Bath, the first real research was carried out by a man called James Thomas Irvine, who was clerk of works to Gilbert Scott when Gilbert Scott was redoing the Abbey. And Irvine came in 1864, he stayed until 1871. And he was a really very high-class archaeologist. He had no training. He came from the Shetland Islands, he was a clerk of works, but my word, his mind was, he was curious. He knew about these discoveries in Bath, and he thought that the temple probably lay somewhere where the old White Hart Hotel used to stand, just opposite the pump room. And so he did a proper excavation. He went into the cellars, he got permission to go into the cellars of this old hotel and dug holes to look for the temple. So that was the first bit of real archaeology. And then they knocked down the old White Hart Hotel to build the pump room hotel, and Irvine was in there like a shot, along with the navvies digging the foundation trenches. There he was with his old notebooks recording bits of archaeology. Really, I suppose it was the 1870s when the city engineer had to make sure the spring flowed properly. And in doing this, they found bits of the baths. And then Major Davis, the city engineer, decided that the baths should be stripped and opened up to the public. But so we have to thank the city engineer then, who realised that Bath had to be made to make money, basically, and he was trying to improve the spa, and he made quite a lot of improvements, but that archaeology and the baths were something that would also help the well-being of Bath as a city. When I first came to Bath in 1963, I was at the university in Bristol, and I came out and dug with the Bath Excavation Committee. And our job really then was just to do excavations where buildings were coming down, new buildings were going up, and there was a chance to get in and look. We did one or two of these around the city. I managed to persuade them to let me do this piece of research excavation in the cellars, and found the altar corner and an inscription. And I remember trying to persuade the council then, this was the 1960s, to open up the space underneath the pump room. And there was no possibility, no one was interested. They only just barely were prepared to allow me to do these, make holes in their cellars. And I wrote in a book, if there was ever anyone with any vision in Bath, it would be possible to do this and this and this. And a few years later, in the 1970s, I had a letter from Bath, a formal letter saying, I've read your book and there is now someone with vision, would you like to come and talk about it? And that was great. This was after local government reorganisation. And before that, it was very staid. After local government reorganisation, everything opened up. So at the end of the work we were doing in the 1960s, I felt that it would come to an end. There was no vision to do very much. And then with local government reorganisation, a new group of people came into the city with real enthusiasm. But there is still so much more to learn. For example, in the baths, in the collection, there is part of a monument which I think is a tholos, which is a circular temple. Was it really a circular temple? Where did it stand? We don't know. Somewhere there. I think it probably was more or less under the front of the abbey. But other people think that opposite the temple would have been a theatre, which indeed happens in Gaul, for example. So you have your temple worship and you have your religious performances in the theatre. And that's another possibility. But we don't know where this tholos stood. We don't know whether there was a theatre there. We don't know what other religious buildings there were in Bath. So I would say we know 3 or 4% of what there is that we could learn. I think the importance of Bath in the Roman Empire is the cluster of buildings it's got are virtually unique. We've got this wonderful bathing establishment, brilliantly preserved, and the temple as well, although you can't see so much of it. Having a temple and the sacred spring, the hot water gushing out of the ground at 250,000, 350,000 gallons a day. There's nothing quite like it. What we've got are the buildings which enable us to understand how people in the Roman period thought and what their suspicions were and what their beliefs were. And I think there is nowhere you can find it better than going around Roman Bath.